Welcome to the Autonomic Healing Podcast. I'm Tom Pels.
And I'm Ruth Lorensson. We'll be unpacking what it looks like to activate your brain to holistically manage stress and trauma that bring healing to the mind, body, and spirit.
Being free to live authentically as humans.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started.
So we're here, Tom, in our ABCs of Thriving, and I feel like I want to congratulate us because we're on the letter Y. We're almost done with this series. It's been a fantastic series to go through. It's all about thriving. Such an important topic for us as humans, right? We don't want to just be surviving. We want to be, what's it look like for us to thrive? And so we're on the letter Y, and I'd love you to just introduce the word and like what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, and I thought Y, when it comes to thriving, could and probably should be about yield. And yield is to give way or to give in. And inherent in yield is an exchange of something of value. And if there isn't that exchange of something of value, we don't thrive, and we may not even survive. So maybe unpacking that word yield, and what is that actually about? Because most people are very familiar with it. If they've driven on the streets and the roads, they've seen that yellow sign that says yield.
Yeah.
When we first talked about the idea that it would be this, that was your first association with it. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think, I just want to say as well, it's interesting because we were joking about the letter Y, and we're like, what are we going to do for the letter Y? Because it's such an odd letter, and yet we've come up. Well, actually, you came up with the word yield, and I remember when I met you last week, and you said, I've got the letter Y, and I saw your face beaming, and it's because actually I think this is one of my favorite words that we're going to unpack, and it's such a great, important, deep, multifaceted word that we're going to unpack for thriving yield. But you're right, the first thing that came up for me was like, well, that's what you do on the road, right? You yield to the oncoming traffic. So that's certainly going to be one part of what we talk about with yielding, like how yielding to other flow of our interconnectedness with human beings, with community, with partners, in relationships, to even our own selves, what is happening, how that's so important and such a vital part of thriving. But why don't you just describe a few of the other facets of yielding, because it is a word that does mean multiple things, and I think that's why this conversation is so interesting for us. So can you share a little bit more, Tom?
Mm-hmm. So yield, when there is this exchange of value, back Middle Ages and such, medieval time, there was in the Old English and the Old German or the High German, there was this idea of Geld or Geld. And in Yiddish, there's Geld, and that's associated with gold and something of value. Taxes were paid, and those taxes were Geld. So there was this idea inherent in the GELD, however that's pronounced, with something of value. This is something that has value, and in the exchange of that thing of value came the word yield. And yield became pronounced yield. And so its primary association many years ago which is still true today, is the yield that a harvest produces. What was the yield of the harvest? Or in financial terms, you have an investment. What is the yield on that investment? And the idea here is that there is something of value and it is being exchanged.
Yeah.
And so why would that be a yellow sign on the side of a road? Well, because there's value in the human lives. And
Yeah.
there's value in getting from one place to another place. And if there isn't a yielding, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, so there's something about yielding that is it's entering into this exchange of human connectedness and even connectedness with ourselves that allows us, we enter into, sometimes we give way, literally, that's the yielding on the road, and sometimes we receive, which is the yielding of the harvest. And so it's this movement, it's this exchange that we kind of enter into as humans that involves all sorts of areas of our lives. And I guess it's the intuition of to know when to give and when to, when are those seasons happening, and it might not even be a season, it might be multiple things in one day, but when is the time to give way to something that might not feel like, super exciting. It's like, when you yield on a road, your car comes to a stop, or, mostly a stop, pretty much there, unless there's not much time for you, unless the traffic's really slow at that point or something like that. So it doesn't feel like you're like going for it, you're going fast in life in those times. But then there's also times where you're embracing a yield where actually you get to receive this harvest. It's like, oh, that's part of it too. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. But let's just talk a little bit about the why it's important. I mean, I think one of the things, I'm sat here right now with a neck collar on because I had a car accident like a number of months ago now, and I've got a few things going on with my neck. But the idea was that actually in that accident, the other driver, they didn't just speed through a yield sign, they sped through a stop sign. So obviously I'm like an absolute example right now of the type of impact that can happen if we don't yield. And so if we don't yield, if we don't give way to certain situations in life, not only can we harm others, but like me, but we can harm ourselves in that process. So that's like, I think that's good reason in of itself, but it doesn't stop there. But I think that's part of it, right? It's like you were mentioning earlier on your experiences. Where were you again when you were traveling?
Yes, Phnom Penh. Many years ago, I was in Cambodia on a humanitarian trip, aquaculture, helping people with fish farming for produce, but also their own nourishment, but also not just aquaculture, but related to it, having pure drinking water and it was a humanitarian trip. When we landed in Phnom Penh, which is the capital of Cambodia, and we went into the downtown area, that was my first experience with something that I'd never encountered here in the United States. And the main roadway through the center of Phnom Penh, think of a street, a major street through New York or Washington, D.C., or some major metropolitan area. And in the middle of the street, there were no lane markings. There was simply 2 lines down the center of the roadway, and everybody navigated their way one way or another. And I mean, it in places it was 7 or 8 vehicles wide on each side.
Yeah.
And there was no lanes. There were no traffic lights. There was nothing. People just negotiated their way down this main thoroughfare. And there was this constant yielding that people did with one another to make that work. And it actually worked. It was just astonishing to me to see the traffic continuing to move. But what it required was this constant moment by moment yielding of one motorist or even pedestrians or people on the little tuk-tuks, which was the motorcycle thing with a couple of seats in the back of it in a little cabin. And everybody was yielding to one another, because if they didn't yield, there would just be a gridlock and no one would be able to move anywhere. So while they couldn't move with the freedom that they wanted to or at the speed they wanted to, they could keep moving. And they could actually do it safely. It was astonishing to me. I'd never seen anything like that. Imagine there's only, I mean, picture your downtown Main Street and there's two lines down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
If nobody yields, nobody's moving ultimately.
Yeah.
But it's also, yield enters into something much less significant than that, or obvious, because when you and I are doing this broadcast, because of the nature of the way we're doing it, and you're not driving down and we're not sitting down face to face, the nature of this recording means that we can't talk over each other because it'll just be a terrible thing. So we are yielding to one another in this conversation. I listen to you, you don't talk, you listen to me, and we don't talk over one another. We are literally yielding so that this exchange of value, your time, your thoughts, can actually be recorded.
Yeah, so let me just tell the listeners where we're at right now, because normally me and Tom, we meet in person and we enjoy that. And there's something really nice about podcasting, which is an in-person thing. But because I'm like, a little fragile right now with my neck, we decided that I would stay up here in Fort Collins while Tom's down in Denver. So we're doing this online, which is slightly more unusual. And that's what you're talking about, is that actually we have to engage slightly differently than normal, whereas we talk all over each other all the time.
Yes, we do.
But with an online recording, that we need to be yielding more to each other. But I think one of the things, Tom, that so we've got this, with that description of that road that you just gave, the value is human life, right? The value is like, no one wants to get harmed, so we're yielding. There's an intuition there for every driver on that road to, while they do want to get to their destination, they also want to get there alive. So that is the value equation. And then there's that exchange that's happening almost intuitively there. But talk to me, in our pre-conversation earlier, you talked to me about the sunflower, and it's a really beautiful picture of this yielding as well. I think I'd love you to share that, because I think it's something that's again a very different picture from the crazy traffic. I went to Thailand years and years ago, and I know exactly what you mean. Like, it's like, how is everyone alive here? We don't know, but somehow it's working. But there's also this other picture of the sunflower. So speak about that.
So the idea with yield is there is a value in something given in payment or a sum of money, but it's also, in the original words, a service or an offering, something done that is beneficial. And there's this allowing of someone or something control or influence for something that you have control or influence over. And there's this yielding of one thing to another. There's the motorist idea, but there's also with sunflower stalks. And how are sunflower stalks associated with all these things? Yield. And the nature of our having conversation, yield. Because the curious thing, and I'm fascinated by sunflowers, I think, one, they're just lovely and beautiful. But with the sunflower stalk, during the day, the east side, and the sun rises in the east, And during the day, the east side of the sunflower stem grows faster than the west side, causing the plant to sway west. In other words, to yield. At night, the west side grows faster, causing the plant to swing back to the east. And this movement is controlled by two growth mechanisms. And that's a manifestation of a plant yielding to the source of how important is sunlight to the growth of a plant? That and water and some nutrients, that's what allows it. But literally, the stalk of the sunflower yields. It shifts, it sways to maximize the receiving of the sun yielding its energy. Yield is such a fundamental concept to life itself. And if there isn't a yielding, then life doesn't even happen. And for a yielding, and if the yielding does happen, that swaying east and west to catch the sun, or us allowing the conversation to go without interruption, or to travel safely on the roadway, there is an exchange of value. Something is of value, and there's this exchange of it, and that is in every moment of our life. So if we do that, then thriving occurs. If we don't do that, we may not even survive.
Yeah, I love that, Tom, because this is, the picture of the road is almost like, well, okay, we've got to, we need to yield so that we don't harm each other, right? So that's one thing, and that's pretty important. But this kind of develops the understanding of yielding and its significance in thriving, and it's about homeostasis. This is about life and well-being, and I picture that sunflower, kind of swaying to the east and swaying to the west, depending on what time of day it is, as a way of kind of almost becoming the optimal version of itself. And then I see myself as that sunflower, and it's like, actually, there are times, and it can be in a whole year, or it could be within a day, where there is a swinging that we need to, if we can yield to the different things that come our way, it allows us to enter into homeostasis where we have that well-being. So, for example, just to illustrate the point in my life right now, I'm and this is on a bit of more of a macro level, but I'm doing all sorts of things. I'm building a coaching business. I'm finishing up my MBA. I'm writing a book. I'm doing all sorts of things. And now I've got this like situation where I've got some problems with my neck. I'm probably going to have surgery. And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, everything's grinding to a halt, right? This next year of my life suddenly is looking like it could be a slower year for me than what I would have anticipated. However, for me, I see it almost like that sunflower of like, well, okay, I've been doing all this stuff, and maybe I've just got to yield, and I'm swinging to just making sure my health is good. And you know what? It's a slower year, and that's okay. But in the long run, my well-being, body, mind, spirit, not just what I'm doing, but who I am, my emotions, my physical body, I'm achieving that thriving, and to be able to yield to those things that come along. And instead of seeing it is a bummer, it feels like, that was my initial thought. But instead of seeing it like that, just to think, okay, well, maybe there's balance here. Maybe there's provision in this that I needed that will balance me, just like that, how that sunflower swings to the east, because actually we need to grow. We don't want to grow out of sorts. We don't want to grow we don't want to grow in achievements and our health to suffer. that wouldn't be thriving. And I think that so many people are in those spaces where that, maybe they're on one thing they're doing great, but that is costing them on another side of it. And so when you enter into this amazing exchange of giving, receiving, exchanging, sometimes you're at the top of the mountain, sometimes you're at the bottom of the mountain. I don't know which one it is, but both are important. In wellness, in thriving, and being able to yield to whichever one is happening, like I said, on a macro level or on just these micro levels day to day, that is going to help us in that kind of holistic growth of thriving as a human being. Does that make sense? Have I made sense of that?
Absolutely, because what you were describing, there is inherent in our individuality yielding, or we don't yield. The workaholic not yielding to rest and pace or relationship, or the person who is all about relationship but isn't producing. There's a yielding that we do within ourselves, and it's involved in an exchange of something of value in body, mind, and spirit. One of the things I've just recently added to the 14 years as a minister, and since 1997, that along with being a psychotherapist, and just recently I've added certification in wellness coaching. And what I'm learning in that space is that, generally understood, wellness is often thought of as being disease-free, or I have wellness and everything is wonderful. That's not wellness. In their book, the Wellness Workbook, How to Achieve Enduring Health and Vitality, authors John Travis and Regina Ryan give multiple definitions of wellness. And one of those describes wellness as the integration of body, mind, and spirit. The appreciation that everything you do and think and feel and believe has an impact on your state of health and the health of the world. And that is body, mind, and spirit for everyone. So the National Wellness Institute, wellness is a process of becoming aware of and making choices toward a more successful existence. Don Ardell, wellness is not the mere absence of illness, but a continual striving to live a life that is full, meaningful, zestful, and exuberant. And if we don't yield, and we don't see the value in yielding and really treasure yielding, we miss out on participating in that exchange of value that is mutually beneficial person to person, but also intrapersonal, and body, mind, and spirit all benefit from the exchange of something valuable. Our time is valuable. Ask a workaholic who never rests, who never stops, and ultimately their body and probably their mind, perhaps even their spirit, will all pay the price for that lack of exchange of value, of yielding to rest and exercise and diet. And yield is inherent in every moment of our existence. And as we learn the value of yielding, we learn the value of a way to thrive. If we don't, we may not even survive.
Yeah, and I think, Tom, what I would suggest there is, as our listeners are listening to this conversation, is almost, that yield sign on the road is such a strong symbol, but it's like, apply that to your life. Like, what are the signs? What are the signs circumstantially? What are the signs emotionally? What are the signs in your body? Like, what are you feeling? and pay attention to those signs and yield to the signs. So like I said, for me, a sign is like, oh, I might have to have surgery right now. That's a yielding to something. But it might be that, you know, it's less obvious than that. It might be that you're not sleeping well. That's a sign. So it's like when you have a sign, it's like pay attention and think, what have I got to yield to in this season of my life? If you know, there's many yield signs, I think. And I wonder whether part of us thriving is having the ability to just really see those signs. And instead of fight those signs, which I think for me and my personality, I have a tendency to do, to go, okay, yeah, I'll yield, because not only will this stop any level of harm to myself or others, but also it will allow the full balance of wellness within my own self. It will allow me overall, it might not feel like it at the time, but it'll allow me overall to kind of grow and like grow healthily, you know, mind, body, spirit. So I think that those are the things I would like, you know, I just think are important. And then I think you mentioned, you know, this isn't just ourselves, but this is the way, this is impacting our community, whether that's our relationships with spouses or parenting or friendships or work colleagues. This all really comes into play with those spaces too. I mean, you know, you can't have a healthy relationship without yielding to one another. You know, we all know that deep down, I think. Do you want to share a little bit about that at all?
Yeah. So when it comes to what are the signs, look for wellness. And where is there an absence of wellness? Where are things not functioning well? And wellness, though, is just the tip of the iceberg. It's what you see. Below that is then, if there isn't wellness in the state of my health, then look below that and look at lifestyle. What's my life? What is my lifestyle? What am I living? And what behaviors am I engaging in? So look there, because a lot of times, if you think about it, someone's lifestyle may say a lot about the presence or absence of their sense of wellness.
So good.
And then below that, added to that, is the mind, the psychological state, the perceptions of self and others and situations, the emotions that go with that. And then those are giving rise to the lifestyle and behavioral choices. And so there is the mind. So there's the lifestyle element, but below that is what are the perceptions? What are the emotions? What is the psychological state? The motivation, which direction is that going? Is that going in the direction of wellness or in the direction of a lack of wellness or even burnout? And because that is what manifests in lifestyle and behavioral choices. And then at the deepest level is spirit. Us as a being interacting with other beings. One person interacting with themselves at a spiritual, deep being, meaning of life and significance level. And why? Because that is what gives rise and informs the perceptions, and vice versa. So there is a yielding that we can beneficially engage in toward wellness. And if we don't, we won't thrive. But if we do, we can thrive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as we wrap up, I just want us to make sure we don't miss out this other side of yielding, because there's a part of yielding which is receiving, which is it's the bounty, it's the harvesting, it's the oh, our hard work has yielded a crop or yielded success or whatever it is. And that can be in all sorts of levels. It doesn't have to be in terms of achievement. It can be in terms of relationships. It can be in terms of, there are going to be times in our lives where great things happen. Like we're like in those moments of like, oh my gosh, all of the things that I've aimed for are happening right now. The likelihood is that doesn't happen all the time. You know, that there's an importance for it to happen at times, but they will happen. And the reason I bring it up is because as much as, you know, we want to make sure that we're not harming people by not yielding, and that we're actually growing holistically in wellness by yielding. Also, I think there's like a challenge, so to speak, or a charge for us to be able to be people, if we're going to thrive, to be able to be people who engage well when things are good. And the reason I say this, Tom, is that you would think, of course, you would engage well, but actually a lot of people don't know what to do when actually the yield comes. And you know, I mentioned this to you earlier, but for me, it's like I've had loads of times in my life where I haven't had much money or whatever it is, and in those times I'm like, oh my gosh, if only I could go shopping in New York and buy. I'm a fashion person, so I love to buy all these clothes, and in those times of lack, I'm like thinking about all of the things I would do if I ever had that like surplus money, right? And then there's been times where I've had that surplus money and I'm almost stuck, and I'm just like, I don't even know what to do with it. And I mean, I know that's a very kind of specific example, and it's not always about money. It could be about you know, an accomplishment with studying or your career or a relationship or whatever. I mean, it applies in so many areas. But the point is, how do we be people who thrive when and are able to embrace the yields when it comes well, not in a way that's like we've talked about this before, this sober-mindedness of not overly going crazy, but also not missing it when it happens, because there's a point of it happening in those times. So talk to me about this. I can see you nodding.
Yes, we're talking about that deepest level in being and spirit and motivation. And that plays into the level above it, which is the mind and perceptions and that sort of thing. One of the things I've been fascinated over the course of my professional career in mental health, and I'm interested to explore it in the coaching realm, is that one of the things I have often run into is something that we as human beings are very familiar with, and that's the fear of failure. And that fear of failure can be very motivating and drive us to succeed. One of the things I found is that oftentimes people's issues aren't with the fear of failure. It's the fear of success.
Yeah.
And you've described it. Mm-hmm. That is practically a phobia about succeed. Now what? Because with the success, with the thriving, comes opportunity, but along with it, responsibility. What do I do with that responsibility? What do I do with the opportunity? And the thriving itself can be sensed or perceived as a threat to well-being. And the idea here is that as we, and if we embrace yielding, we can yield to the good times and enjoy that.
Mm.
But if we don't know how to or value yielding, then the bounty itself may become toxic. That's why yielding, whether it's in times of plenty or times of want, yielding like that sunflower swaying depending upon the movement of the sunlight, we can sway. And the sun is shining, or it's over there now. We can maximize growth and well-being with yielding.
Yeah, I love that, Tom, and such a good conversation. And it actually, I feel very inspired myself in this conversation, to be thinking of yielding more, just more like in my life and in some of the big things that I'm handling, but also some of the smaller things. And it feels like just something very tangible that we can do in thriving in our pursuit of growth and wellness, and being human beings that don't just like survive through this lifetime, but actually enjoy it and thrive and seize the good times, the harder times, but know that we're moving forward. So I've really appreciated this conversation, and we are going to be coming back together to talk, and we're wrapping up this whole season. Go on.
One more time. One more letter, and it's Z.
It's Z. So hold that space. We'll look forward to having that conversation next time.
You've been listening to the Autonomic Healing Podcast.
Join us next time as we continue in our conversations with Tom. If you're interested in pursuing your own autonomic healing journey and want to find a practitioner, visit our website, innerworkings.org. See you at the next episode.